On today's episode, I get lost in a space pod. Hello friends, and welcome back to the Plastic Imagination Workshop, where I build, paint, discuss, and customize all sorts of scale models. On today's episode, I will be building the space pod from Lost in Space, that classic TV series from the 60s. The original Lost in Space television series aired on American television between the years of 1965 and 1968. The series, which was an Irwin Allen production, was heavily inspired by the 1812 novel The Swiss Family Robinson. The show ran for 83 episodes, and even though it doesn't age well to today's standards, this show was brought out in a time that was between the eras of the original Star Trek and Star Wars. The series does have its own charm, and it had a huge following. I myself remember sitting countless hours in front of the television set watching these shows that were being re-aired and rebroadcast over the UHF channels. For me, it was Channel 44 in the Bay Area. As I'm sure a lot of you can remember watching this TV show and just being amazed by the stories and the spaceships, and especially the robot, which was one of my favorite characters in the show. Yes, it is corny, especially when you have aliens that are dressed like this. But overall, I felt the stories were fairly well written. And again, up to today's standards, probably not so much, but for then, for a kid, watching after school, these TV shows like this were amazing. I really enjoyed watching them, and they were a big part of my childhood growing up. I wish I had a kit of this back then. I would have definitely built it, but since we didn't, now we have these kits here. And this kit is one that I've always wanted to build ever since it first came out years ago. And now I'm finally able to get my hands on it and build it. So stick with me, we're gonna do a quick unboxing, and then you can follow me through the build process, and then stay tuned until the end, where I'll summarize everything up, give you my pros and cons of the kit, suggest who might be a good match to build this kit, and my thoughts overall along the way. So let's get right in to the unboxing and see what's inside the box. Okay, let's start off with the instructions sheet. Nice black and white picture, some information about the space pod and the TV series. And here are our building instructions. A little different than what I'm used to in other brands of kits, but they seem well laid out, and there's a lot of information there, so it should go. And this is not a very complicated kit, so it should go together pretty well. Here's our paint scheme, some more pictures down here. Okay, so it looks like from the copyright down here that this kit was released probably again in 2019. So not a very old kit. Let's see what we've got in store with us. So, start off, we have some pretty large pieces. That's the size of my hand there against it. So this is our front bulkhead. These are the sides. Got a whole lot of detail there. Here's the rehatch. We've got some raised detail here for interior, which you probably never see, but we can make that look good. This is the other part of the rear bulkhead. Okay, here we have our internal panels. We've got some nice raised detail there. We can bring some detail out of those. And we have, this is part of the control panel inside the spacecraft. All right, we also have a bag of smaller parts. This looks like to be the interior parts and maybe parts of the landing gear. Yeah, some pretty small parts over here, but all in all, they look well molded. This is the control panel in there. What else do we have here? Okay, here we have the lower power unit and thrusters, the radar antenna, our scanner antenna, some more interior parts, looks like the door. All well molded, look very clean. I think those will work out great. Then we have our clear parts. This is for the bottom. We have the windows up front. And it looks like we have a decal sheet in there. So crack this. Whoops, let's crack this open and see what that decal sheet looks like. All right. Okay. Yeah. Nice clean looking decal sheet. These are for the markings on the outside there. And that's about it. So, all right, well, let me clean this mess up. I'm gonna grab some glue and some sanding sticks and my cutters, and we're gonna get to the build. After cleanup and priming, I decided to use a tan color for the interior. Then I followed with alternating colors to add more detail to the control surfaces. I used Vallejo's aluminum to paint the girders. Painting the interior walls and control surfaces required a lot of masking, but in the end, it's worth it. When it came to painting all of the control surfaces, I really didn't follow a particular guide. I just went with what I thought looked good. I used a liquid chrome pen to go over all of the buttons and indicators on the control panels first. Then I went back with transparent paint and other colors to bring out the details. Here I'm using some black panel line accent color to bring out the detail in the girders and other places of the interior. The individual pieces that make up the interior went together really well and came out looking really good. took a lot of masking to paint the detail on the front of the main hull. That said, the end result was definitely worth it. I decided to drill out the holes in the maneuvering rockets. I just think this adds a more realistic look. When I test fitted the pins on these landing gear parts, they were very tight, so I drilled the holes out just a little bit with a tiny drill to make sure that they would assemble a lot easier. To clean up the panel line wash, I use a Q-tip with a little bit of turpentine on it. we are back with the completed space pod from Lost in Space. So this kit was a lot of fun to build. Again, another kit that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I finally got the opportunity to build it, and I think it came out really nice. I didn't go exactly by the instructions as to paint scheme and stuff. I mean, I did stick to the exterior colors. For me, that's kind of an iconic look, but I did add a little more detail around these. Yeah, you know, I added some fading to make it look a little weathered on some parts, and I just had fun with it. I really did. I just had fun with it. You can't really see the interior much from this angle, but I'll pop up some pictures of the interior here so you can check that out. Again, I didn't follow the guidelines and a lot of pictures of other builds. I just kind of did my own thing on the control surfaces, and I think it came out really good, and I really like it. As far as the build went, for me, it was a little more challenging than I anticipated it to be. Basically, the instructions are not super clear and precise with a lot of pictures. I mean, if you read, you have to read it several times in each section. Read it over and over every time. I ended up actually having to write down what parts were what part numbers, so as I'm reading it, I could wrap my head around it a little bit, and kind of understand what goes where and how it goes where. But overall, everything eventually did go together okay. The most challenging part of the build, assembly-wise, was actually getting the exterior hull put together and mounted. So, because the interior goes on first, you assemble the interior first, and then you assemble the outer hull around it. Getting everything to line up and go into place is pretty challenging. But if you work at it and just take your time, you can eventually get it together like it's supposed to be. The part I thought was going to be challenging, the landing struts, was actually pretty straightforward and pretty easy. Had no issues with those whatsoever. The parts still move like they should. And so yeah, that came out really good. A lot of masking had to be done on this thing. Not only masking the interior for painting the individual control surfaces, but the exterior. The front fascia here, I masked it probably 3 times to get the base color, and then to get the orange, and then to get the individual colors for these surfaces here. And these lines around here were a little challenging, but you know, if you take your time and you're patient, you can get those masked off pretty well, and then you can get your paint sprayed down. Okay, for the paint on here, I used a couple different brands, but the orange is done in Wicked Orange from Createx Colors. That came out really good on the front and on the top here. For the body, I used a Pearl Starship White from Mission Models, and I really like how that came out. That's this color on the sides here and in the back. Came out really nice. And then for the front, which is a little bit of a different tone, I used Vallejo's Model Air, just plain aluminum, for around here and this surface here. And it added a nice contrast. And then for some other surfaces, I used Mission Models Dark Aluminum in other areas, just to give it some contrast, so it wasn't just all one. Like this here is the dark aluminum, and a couple of the other spots. And again, I think this model just came out really good, and I'm really happy with how it came out. Okay, time for the pros and cons. We'll start with the pros. Really nicely modeled kit, nicely molded kit. Not a lot of flash, not a whole lot of cleanup for the most part. Even this part here with the little grids, those were very nicely molded, and a lot of detail. The control surfaces have a lot of detail. This antenna up here has a lot of detail. They really held true to the actual studio model, I believe, and it shows, and it came out really good as far as the kit itself goes. Other pros, it's just a fun kit. Definitely, if you're a fan of the show or of the Space Pod, you're really going to enjoy this kit. Okay, for the cons. For the cons, the instructions are a little lacking and they're not super clear. There are not a lot of images in the instructions to go by, so not really a kit for a new builder. I would say you'd have to be a pretty good builder to build this kit right. I mean, you could kind of try to put it together, but it's going to be challenging and frustrating for a lot of people, I think. So definitely you want to have some builds under your belt to do this one, especially if you're going to paint it. The painting, even though it looks simple, the masking, like I said, can be very challenging. Another con, the assembly portion of the outer hull, I think it could have been done a little better. However, overall, I would say still not a bad kit at all. I would say the biggest con on this kit is going to be the instructions, because you're not going to be able to really go just by the instructions. I mean, if you had already built this kit, sure, you're going to know where kind of everything goes and how it goes. But if you've never built this kit before, you're going to have to do a lot of research online. I had to do a lot of research online and get a lot of photos of completed and process builds from the internet just to kind of understand how it's supposed to go, because it's not really clear on the instructions. So the instructions are the biggest con on this kit. So this will conclude my full build of the Space Pod from Lost in Space by Moebius Models. I hope you enjoyed the build. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, can you please give me a thumbs up? Leave me some comments down below. I'd love to hear your input on this. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. So I hope everyone's having a great weekend. And as always, be safe out there and go build something.